Okay, good evening, everyone. James is going to share here for us. So I'm Carroll Moon, CTO of CloudFit Software, long-term Microsoft guy as well, almost 18 years before CloudFit. Honored to be presenting with Anchore today, who are driving fully automated DevSecOps. We've worked together at some DoD customers, and so we're taking the time to opportunity to present together today. So if we jump in, let's go ahead and jump in, James. So really, most of you on the phone are aware of the government's software challenges today. There's no shortage of software challenges in any industry or vertical or regulated industry for that matter. No different in DoD. Software is complex. There's a myriad of legacy systems. There's so many modern systems. There's various enclaves in DoD with IL2 and IL5 and IL6 and Secret SAR and all these various environments, some disconnected, some disconnected, some connected, some poorly connected. Just it's a vast array of things. And to add on top of that, developers going at light speed, to modernize, create new cloud-born applications to drive containerization and so forth. So the complexity is there. But at the same time, we've got this more complexity than we've ever had. There's a higher demand for velocity, both from a speed of innovation perspective. The mission requires more velocity. Our enemies are pushing towards velocity. The fact that the cloud exists is driving a lot of velocity and opportunity because everybody that has access to the cloud now has access to the world's strongest computers and machine learning and all of this. And so the reality is that with today's requirements, you cannot have a 6, 12, or 18-month ATO cycle. It just is not realistic anymore. And so that's led to the compliance side of things, where the joy of continuous ATO versus the tyranny of existing ATO processes tend to come to the forefront. So having DevSecOps as a mandate in DoD has been very helpful. There's nothing like a mandate to drive motion. And then really to move towards a security posture with verifiable continuous monitoring versus a pure compliance for the sake of compliance posture. So James, let's jump ahead. I'm going to mute this Teams ding in the side there. So apologize for that dinging we've had. So really from a culture change perspective, this is where I'd like to spend the most time. As I mentioned, we've got the carrot. It's a unique time in the industry, and especially in DoD. You've got the carrot of continuous ATO, where developers and business owners are leaning forward, reaching towards continuous ATO, and then you've got the beauty of the DevSecOps mandate pushing them in the back. So as they lean forward for continuous ATO, they get a little shove from the mandate, which is really, really helpful in changing culture. And I know Commander Sampson will talk a little bit about that. Obviously, training developers is a big deal, training everyone, but when you've got thousands of developers, you can't snap your fingers and make everyone experts, and especially experienced experts. So there's a difference between book knowledge and experience, and so I think that's a big deal. So yes, we want to train everyone in Agile, in DevSecOps, in containerization, in Kubernetes, in Istio, and all the great technologies that enable this. But at the end of the day, there needs to be a center hub providing the ecosystem, not just the CI/CD pipeline or the containerization or Kubernetes, but the security tool, the logging, the developer hangouts, how the developers are collaborating, and then the continuous monitoring aspects of things are really important too. And so that center hub, if you do the center hub enablement for the spokes that are the development teams, yes, train all the development teams, but also focus really on that center hub. Not just to enable velocity and CI/CD and DevSecOps, but also to reduce cost through modern O&M over time. What we found is that if you do the modern O&M pieces right, you end up funding a lot of the modernization initiatives. But at the end of the day, that center hub is how to drive this. And so it does require a strong commitment to organizational change. But like I said, I've been in this industry a long time and been driving transformations for a long time. The combination of the carrot of continuous ATO with the shove in the back of the DevSecOps mandate in DoD is really unique. So I don't find executive sponsorship or leadership sponsorship to be a problem in most DoD environments more. It's more of a knowledge and more of what is the enabling mission system or mission support system that's going to be the guinea pig that goes first to be able to drive this change. So let's jump ahead, James. Really here, what we're trying to convey, we got three boxes on the screen. We'll go through each slide briefly. There's a fourth box, two sitting off to the right, a fictitious box or a logical box or a virtual box, if you will, of modern O&M, of the operations and maintenance piece. We really have to bake security into each of these. From a upfront, from a CI/CD perspective, we need to keep dangerous stuff, images from, or dangerous builds from succeeding. If you think back to Nirali's demo with Carlo there, you see where the image was pulled down. The image was verified before it ever made it into repo 1. And then as it was deployed, it was verified again. So we've got to make sure that the dangerous images get shut down at the beginning. And if we jump to the next slide, image registry is a big deal. That's what Mr. Shalon and the team there at Platform 1, Repo 1, Iron Bank have done such a great job of, is making this capability available for DoD. So you've got this image registry where everything's verified. And then within various organizations to have their own. So, you know, we're not gonna, if I'm at a particular command and there's a custom mission application, that's custom to that command. It's not gonna get uploaded in Iron Bank or Repo 1. So there's the aspect of localized repo, hardened repo as well, or mission specific images. And then if we jump to the next one, from a deployment perspective, making sure that bad deployments are prevented through Kubernetes and Mission Controller as an example, but also further to the right here, again, the virtual box of being the modern O&M, that if anything does, and this is back to the Azure Blueprint and the Azure policies as well, being able to understand if something comes into the environment that is out of compliance, what do you want to happen there? Do you want just to be able to report on it? Do you want to automatically shut that container down? Do you want to automatically create a security event for the Security Operations Center? All of that ecosystem plays in. And again, the best way to do this is through a center hub, not necessarily organization, but a center hub service that is serving all of the spokes that are the application teams while those application teams are being trained. And so I'll turn back over to James to jump into the demo.
Awesome. Thank you, Carroll. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining tonight. My name is James Petersen, and I want to show you how easy it is to ingrain security into your daily developer lifecycle. So I've created a Go application and containerized it using the latest hardened Red Hat UBI 8 image from Repo 1, just like Nirali showed you. A new developer comes onto my team, tries to change to an older version of Go, doesn't use the hardened image from Repo 1, and that's just not good. When they submit their code to source control, it's built by Azure pipelines and placed in a staging Azure container registry. From there, it's assessed and blocked by Anchore Federal due to the policy violations. Notifications are sent to the developer through the Azure Pipelines UI. They're also sent through Anchore to myself and my security team. I assess the security flaws through the Anchore UI and help the developer fix the issues, updating to the approved Go version and basing the image off the hardened UBI 8 image. The new image is pushed and built, resulting in a pass result, and from there the image is pushed into a production registry where it's pulled into the AKS cluster to handle production workloads. All right, so let's dive into it. So I have a problem. I have notes scattered all over my desk with to-dos all over them. My desk is cluttered. Sometimes I lose notes. Other times it's just distracting. I've tried to use some great to-do software that's out there, but I live in the command line all day, and so it's difficult for me to context switch to another application just to add a quick note or to see what I have coming up next. To solve this problem, I've decided to start my own open source project to create a simple, easy to use notes application. Now, I believe in my project, and I believe it will help keep developers more organized and focused on the task at hand. Because of this, I want to make sure that this is solid and secure software, because it would be great if it could be adapted for developers working in secure government environments. So what I've decided to do is containerize my application and use Anchore along with Azure DevOps pipeline to ensure my application is secure and that it's reliably deployed. I'm running an instance of Anchore in its own AKS cluster. I'm also deploying my application to its own AKS cluster because I want my nodes to be available to me no matter where I am. So here's my Azure DevOps project for my ToDo API server. But before I get started, I've been taking advantage of how easy it is to extend Azure DevOps interface for their pipelines. I created a custom Anchore task that I use to easily add security to my pipeline. So you can see it here. It was really easy to create. It makes integrating security into your pipeline really easy. It's still in the early stages, but it'll be released soon through Anchore for everyone to install and use in their pipelines. All you need is the image name and some basic information about your running Anchore instance, and the task will automatically perform a full vulnerability scan and policy evaluation. So let me show you what it looks like integrated into this pipeline. So you can see here that we have a failed build and release pipeline. Specifically, it's failed on our security scan. Just for the sake of time efficiency, I'm going to actually fast forward and fix the application. And then while the build and release pipeline runs for the fixed deployment, I'll dig into what actually happened. So we fast forwarded. I've been notified through Anchore that the build did not pass policy. Let's jump over to my developer's environment real quick and go ahead and fix this. So first off, let's interact with our ToDo server. So let's go ahead and list. So we see we have some notes here. We have a few tasks, mainly reminders that I need to take care of my dogs. However, currently, we can't mark any tasks as done. So if we try to mark feed the dogs done, we just get that this action hasn't been implemented yet. You can imagine this is pretty important for tracking tasks. So the new developer that came onto the project actually implemented this functionality and is trying to get it into production. However, they used a Docker file that violated our security policy, and therefore it was rejected. Once my SecOps team or myself triages the situation, I find out that the new developer was just so excited to get started that they didn't read the policy document. We've all been there. So I go ahead and go through the policies, help them create a Docker file that will produce a secure container. So I go ahead and I'm just going to copy a good Docker file in for the sake of time, and then fixing security flaws, and go ahead and push that up. Awesome, we pushed it up. Now we're off to the races. So while that runs, let's go over and see what happened and how I was able to catch and fix the security holes so quickly. So up until this new developer came in, I was the only contributor to this project. However, I wanted to future-proof as new developers join the team and ensure my software is of high quality and that it's secure. Now the time has come and a much needed developer has joined the team. They've started fixing my mistakes, they've added cool features, and they're extending the software. However, they aren't aware of best practices when it comes to container security. And so when they go to create their Docker container, it doesn't adhere to our strict policy. You can see here that the Anchore task, all in one, it'll scan the image, it pulls the evaluation results for not only the CVE feeds, but also the policy evaluation. So our Docker image that didn't follow best practice has failed our scan. Anchore has generated a notification, it sent it to me and our SecOps team. And from there, the issue can be triaged and fixed. Now let me show you what's actually going on behind the scenes. So you can see here in the Anchore UI that we have the scan statistics for our failed image. You can see there were packages with CVEs detected in our image. We're running AMD 64 RHEL container, but where Anchore is really powerful is its ability to enforce policy for containers. It doesn't rely solely on CVEs to make decisions. You can make decisions based on CVE results, but you can also add in business policy or security policy to adhere to whatever policy you might need. This means you can enforce best practices for your containers and ensure that only secure, quality software is running in production. So let's take a look at the policies this insecure container violated. You can see here that there are a few stop gates triggered for this policy bundle. That's ultimately what caused it to fail. Actions that violated general best practices, like not running the application as root inside the container. There are also project-specific best practices, such as I want to use the hardened base image from repo 1. So as you see here, I pulled down the base image from repo 1, just like Nirali and Carlos showed you, and I have it in my own private registry. And so I just want to check and make sure that we're actually using that image. And then also, I want to make sure that I'm using the latest version of Go. And then we also see that our developer, they tried to add the Golang tarball and install an earlier version of Go, not the latest version of Go. And they also tried to use the add instruction, which pulls from a remote site and puts it in our Docker file. Now this is okay, but we've deemed that it's better security practice to use our local version of the Golang tarball, since we've already pulled it down and verified that it's all okay. So we'd rather use that than pulling something from an outside source for every build. Now this image didn't violate every rule in our policy bundle, so let me show you our best practices. And I just want to note that this is not the curated DoD policy bundle that's used in Iron Bank and offered by Anchore Federal. This is a simplified bundle that I've created, and it's tailored towards my Go application. So if we go ahead and examine the bundle, we can see here that we have a few policies. Our Golang policy checks our version of Go in the container. It also checks to see which version of Go our executable is using. And we have our Docker file best practices, such as not running as root. We also want to check and make sure, did you really mean to use the add instruction, or can we use the copy instruction instead? And we also want to make sure that common ports such as SSH and Telnet aren't open inside the container. And then we also want to ensure that there aren't any tools in the container that could be used to grab outside software. And then finally, we have our repo 1 or Iron Bank checks. So this is just ensuring that we're running a RHEL distro and that we're actually using the image from the DCAR or Iron Bank, just as you saw. So these policies also, they don't just apply to Linux containers. With the release of Anchore 2.3, we can actually scan Windows containers. So you can see here that if your workload is running Windows containers, they're treated the exact same. We evaluate them against policy bundles the exact same way. So you can see here that this is working with the Docker policy that we have inside our policy bundle. We have it mapped to this specific image. And then you can also dig into the OS files, and you can dig into NuGet packages using the Microsoft Security Research Center feeds, and you can analyze all of this for full coverage and security for production grade software. All right, let's check out how our pipeline is doing. Awesome, so we are almost pushed. You can see here that we have a few stages. Like I said, we stage our image in an Azure Container Registry, and then we go ahead and scan our image using Anchore, which gives us our scan results. You can see here we add the image, we scan it, and then it returns that we've passed. You can also take a look at this image and see that we are all green. We are good to go. We've passed all of our policy checks, and we are ready to roll. So let us just deploy to AKS here, and we are good to go. Awesome. So our build succeeded. So what happened here? Well, my SecOps team and myself, we were notified of the policy violating container attempting to make it through our pipeline. We triaged the situation and found out that our new developer just didn't know. So I went ahead and pointed them to our standard Docker file. I helped them create a Docker file that follows best practices, and they were able to use it and customize it for their own purposes and get a container into production. So let me switch back over to my developer's environment. So you can see here our project. It's fairly simple. We have our server and we have our Kubernetes infrastructure, everything that defines our Kubernetes deployment. We have our Azure pipeline and our Docker file used to containerize this whole application. And then we also, I have, for simplicity's sake, a few Docker files included in here. The bad Docker file being the Docker file that failed policy scan that our new developer tried to use. The good Docker file being the Docker file that I provided to them or that passed into production. And then we also have a Windows Docker file to containerize this application on a Windows container. So if we go ahead and take a look at our bad Docker file, you can see here that they tried to pull from, they're still pulling a UVI8 image, but they did not pull from our repo1 hardened bank of images. And then they also tried to add an older version of Go. They built an older version of Go, and then they're also running the container as root, which is bad for production environments. So if we go ahead and switch over to our good Docker file, the one that got deployed, you can see that we're pulling from the dcar or Iron Bank. We're copying over our local version of our Golang tarball and installing from that, installing the latest version, and then we are creating a user and deploying our software as that user. So if we go ahead and check this out, we can see this is our Kubernetes pod that we're running on. So we are indeed running on a different pod. And let's see if our new developer actually got it to work. Yep, and we're good. So we can now, we've now added the functionality to mark tasks as done. This is great. So our application works. The changes, they were pushed into production. They're secure. We know that they're secure because they passed the Anchore scan. So let's recap. This is a great, simple example of how security can easily be adopted inside an everyday development lifecycle. It showed some practical best practices for securing containers and avoiding security flaws no matter who is working on the project. And finally, it showed how easy it is to incorporate security into modern software development using Anchore. Security is a must-have. There's no more margin for error in production software, and shifting security left towards the developer is vital for everyone from open source projects like mine to mission-critical software running on government systems. With that, I'll throw it back over to Carroll and let him wrap up.
Thank you, James. I know there's a couple of questions that have come in. I'll go quickly through these best practice slides, and then I'll throw a couple of questions at you. So a handful of things we wanted to leave you with a few five thoughts. One, train the entire team together, share a single process. So a combination of training all the spokes, all the dev teams, and then share that single process, which is that idea of a center hub service to be able to onboard and run towards these outcomes. Second is build a tool chain using hardened infrastructure components. So one of the questions I know that came in through the chat was Anchore looks to be effective in the CI/CD and CVE detection. It's super useful. Would it also be useful to let the developer see that they broke compliance or best practice rules before they submit their PR or commit code to the pipeline? And of course, the answer to that's yes. I don't think anybody's implying here that Anchore is the only tool. Even in the demos today, we've shown OpenShift, we've shown Azure Blueprints, we've shown Anchore. There's always the build and components, the continuous monitoring components, including the things that we talked through with Azure policy. So absolutely, the whole idea is to take that whole supply chain and make sure that it's secure in every component. If you think back to some of our slides at the beginning of this demo. So we totally agree with you there. Thirdly, create a library of hardened images. And I just want to give thanks to what Mr. Shalon and the team at Cloud One, Platform One, Repo One, Iron Bank have done, what they're doing to enable this for all of DoD and all of the vendors and ISVs and everyone, including Microsoft, that's contributing to that Iron Bank and Repo One to let us all stand on the shoulders of others so that we don't have to recreate the work to do things like a couple of clicks to fully compliant infrastructure, a couple of clicks to fully deployed, in this example that Nirali did, OpenShift, and a couple of clicks to fully deploy applications pulling from Iron Bank and Repo One is really impressive. And then, but also to create that library of hardened images for yourself, for your mission applications. Fourthly, adopt the DoD compliance policy baselines and extend those to meet the mission needs. So one of the questions in the chat too is, what's the best foundation for understanding this material? We got some links on the next slide that'll help you. There's specifically a DoD reference design from Nick Shalon and the Platform One team. Nick, if you don't know him, is the Chief Software Officer of the Air Force. He's also leading DevSecOps for DoD. Tremendous amount of content. We'll give you that link in a moment. And then fifthly, use the automated tooling to check compliance frequently throughout the pipeline, throughout that life cycle, including in the modern O&M side of things. Let's jump to the next slide and we'll leave them with a few links. Azure Blueprints, Nirali walked you through that fantastic resource for you to be able to make a couple of clicks and deploy a secure environment. I don't think there's any other way to do that. Really, really impressive stuff. Also, to the point about Mr. Shalon's document library there, if you're looking for the reference design, if you're looking for Platform One, if you're looking for Repo One, all of that is at that link that you have there. And then finally, a great case study from my friends at Anchore with what they've done at the U.S. Air Force. And James, let me throw this question at you too. I mentioned it briefly in the best practice bullets, but to that question around wouldn't it be useful to also let the developer see if they broke compliance best practices before they submit their PR or commit code to the pipeline? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think it's very important to, as I said, shift everything left and put the tools in the hands of the developers. And that's actually something that Anchore is working on. Right now we have inline scan, which you can run a stateless scan on your machine, scan a local image, and see if it passes policy before you even do anything with it. And we're actually working on tooling coming up in our next few releases that will increase the speed and the ease of use for those tools. So I think that's a great question. It's definitely something that we're considering.
And one other, thank you for that. And one other point too, I think we've got about a minute left, but to the point of what's the best foundation for understanding this material, there are multiple lifetimes worth of learning to be had here. You know, I think that the middle link that we got on the screen here, Mr. Shalon's site, is fantastic. Most of the references that you need are going to be there. There's also Ask Me Anything sessions that they do as a team. The recordings of past sessions and the slides of past sessions are there. Fantastic resources. And of course, from an Azure perspective, tremendous amount of content there too, from an Azure perspective. So Karina, we'll hand it back over to you. Thank you.